everyone. As you have probably heard over and over again on this podcast over the past few months, it has been a really great spring for television. There are innovative and original shows that are not just getting made, but becoming the kind of water cooler conversation hits that every network dreams of. And not only that, but one of those hits is The Pitt, which is exactly what TV producers say they want these days. Something that can be produced pretty cheaply and run for many, many seasons, which we all hope is what The Pitt will do. That show is really the best kind of throwback TV, and it's got me wondering if this current period of slowed down TV, cheaper budgets, might actually wind up being at least a little bit of a good thing. So I invited my Ankler colleague, Lesley Goldberg, who has been covering the TV industry for quite a while, to talk to me about the current state of TV production, which showrunners are actually managing to get shows on the air and how they're doing it, and then what we're left with now that the age of peak TV is definitively over, but good stuff is still getting made. Because we've both been getting into The Pitt, we also talk a whole lot about The Pitt. And then after that, you can hear my conversation with Uzo Aduba, who is the star of another buzzy new series set in a single location. That would be Netflix's White House murder mystery, The Residence. I'm Katie Rich, and this is the Prestige Junkie Podcast. Lesley Goldberg, I'm so glad to be working together, as we were just saying before starting, that we've been following each other's work across various areas of the industry for a long time, and here we are together on Team Ankler. So first of all, welcome. Please make this the first of many appearances on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Katie. I'm such a huge fan of yours that I'm so excited to be doing this with you and to be colleagues alongside you. It's so cool over here at the Ankler.
Yeah, thank you. The feeling is mutual. This is obviously high season for me, as the Emmy shows are coming out, and yet again, the Emmys are not till September, so it feels a little crazy. But as someone who covers television year round, is spring still the exciting time when all these new shows are premiering? What level of TV energy are you feeling this time of year?
Well, this time of year, I feel a lot of baseball energy, but it's also, if you know me, you know that that's very on brand. But it's also, this is your time to shine. This is the Emmy window is here. And back in the day when it was just broadcast, everything started, around the school year, right? That's when the new car models came out. Advertisers needed to buy time off of the new shows, and everything was built that way, right? So September was the it time, right? And in broadcast, this is the time of season where all the shows start inching toward their season finales or restarting production on the new seasons. But for streaming, you're in the height of the Emmy window, baby. I made a quick list after you invited me to come join you here on the pod of just the shows that I was excited about this month, April and May, and it's 2 pages long. It's wild how much great stuff there is.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this year we had Severance in January, which I feel like has really smartly done here's a show set in eternal winter, and it's going to come out when you are tired of all the Oscar movies and you need something new. So, we can talk about the calendar trickery and all of that. But yeah, so White Lotus just ended. I'm still catching up on The Pitt. We're absolutely going to get to it. It does feel like there's just been buzzy drama after buzzy drama. The Last of Us is on right now. And I do feel like when we're talking about a lot of these shows, you talk about The White Lotus and you talk about Mike White, you get viral videos of people yelling about Mike White and what he does to it. And you talk about The Last of Us and you get Craig Mazin out there in front. And I think your specialty in covering TV is talking to so many of these people who are behind these shows who, in the last 10 or 15 years, we've kind of started seeing TV shows as an auteur-driven thing, as having a name behind it. So do you see it that way? And how do you kind of explain the power of these names behind these shows and what they're really doing to make them happen?
Well, I think in this climate, coming out of the peak TV wave where you had 600 scripted original shows, just U.S. produced ones airing here in a calendar year, a lot of the bigger names would help you cut through the clutter, right? It's from the mind of Mike White, right? When The White Lotus started, it was during COVID. It was designed as something that you could produce on a relatively cheap budget, and you could do it in quarantine, right? They took over a hotel, right? Super easy. Everyone gets tested. No one leaves the property. No one's going to get COVID. You can produce it like it's
Everyone's
a regular show during the pandemic.
That they went on a trip.
Right, exactly. And where was season 1? Hawaii? Oh my God.
Exactly.
But but Mike White's name definitely helped that get made because he has a long-standing relationship with HBO. The network execs know what they're going to get from him. They know that he can produce something on budget and on time, and that he's got a singular vision, right? But having an established name doesn't necessarily equate to quality always either, right? Sometimes some of the best shows come from creators that you've never heard of, right? Yes, Ben Stiller is an executive producer on Severance, but he didn't create it, right? This is, he helped get that show over the hurdles because he's a veteran name. He knows what he's doing in terms of producing, directing, et cetera. He's someone that can steer it. But a lot of these other shows coming up, like Hacks, right? Those guys, on that you couldn't even name them a couple of years ago.
Yeah. They had Broad City to their name, which was so small and scaled. I mean, but I would imagine Hacks, like if you went back and looked at season 1, it would feel pretty small compared to what it's become now. Like it's been able to grow on proven success, right?
Absolutely, right? In success, you're going to get more money in terms of, actor deals. All 3 creators of Hacks landed overall deals, right? They got paid, right? And as the show becomes a bigger hit, you're going to get a bigger budget to make the show, right? Filming in Vegas versus filming in LA is not the same.
Although the Hacks people will tell you that they have filmed a lot more of it in LA than you would think from have so much set in Vegas. So they've been very proud of their produced in LA bona fides, which I'll give them credit for. You mentioned coming in under budget, which is, we keep hearing endlessly about how TV production is shrinking and no one wants to spend as much money. But then so often when you're getting these bold-faced names attached to television, you're like, Shonda Rhimes paid $500 billion by Netflix or, whatever the numbers are. And obviously some of those huge, well-paid names are still part of it. But how does that ecosystem balance? How do you get Ryan Murphy getting a fortune from Netflix to make a bunch of shows, but also everyone wanting their shows to be cheaper and not, as we know from the studios and the strikes, not wanting to pay everyone a fortune to make them?
Right. Well, with those multi-million-dollar overall deals that the likes of Shonda and Ryan Murphy are getting from streamers and legacy studios like Disney, that's for exclusivity, right? That was part of a push by streamers and networks alike to own their own content. Now, in terms of the budget crunch, you can go to those proven producers and say, I need to make a show on a budget. Your experience, how to make a show for a ton of money, but you can also figure out where to cut costs. And I think that's what you get when you hire someone who's established and like that and who have so much experience like Shonda and Ryan under their belts, because what it's going to cost you bare bones to make what you want, right? Like Ryan Murphy can make a broadcast show on a budget, and then he can make a streaming show for an increased budget. And then he can make an anthology of something that's completely bananas, right? You see the money, oozing on screen.
Yeah.
And then, like you look at the 911 franchise, which he's behind on ABC and formerly Fox.
One of those 911 shows. He had his name on it. Oh my God. That show is it's a behemoth that no one ever talks about.
Right. It's a huge franchise that he created for broadcast, which means it's on a reduced budget, right? You're not going to make a 911 season. You could probably make 2 or 3 911 seasons for what it costs to make Feud or American Horror Story.
Yeah.
But it's a business model, right? It's an ad-supported model.
Yeah. And that's why these people have these long careers on television, is once you've learned how to do it, you can do it over and over and over again. So Shonda Rhimes has one proven hit. She proves she can make the money work. And then your name is gold for the rest of your career, right? If you've made one hit in television. I mean, surely there are exceptions, but that seems to be how it works. If you can do it once, everyone will trust you to do it again and again.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this brings me to The Pitt, which, as I said, I've been catching up on. So my mind keeps going there always. But it has this fascinating prestige TV vibe while also being all taking place in one place. And I don't know I don't think it does feel cheap, but I don't know that it looks expensive. It's just such a fascinating hybrid of these things that we're talking about, of the classic network system. It's got 15 episodes, but also being a little bit more prestigious. And it's got something I think you mentioned in a meeting that John Wells is being one of the names behind it, and what the power to get this made. How does The Pitt manage to emerge from this TV system we have and feel old school, but not so old school that it turns people off? It's such a phenomenon.
Right. And I think you can tie The Pitt to a bigger trend about all these streaming companies that now want to be broadcast networks. When you look at, a platform like Netflix, they've been buying live sports. They've been buying comedy specials. Now they're making shows like The Night Agent, right? It's basically a premium version of a broadcast show. Amazon's been doing it. Jack Ryan, Reacher, these are some of the most streamed originals that Amazon has. And they're basically elevated broadcast shows, just like The Pitt. The big difference here is that The Pitt was produced on a much lower budget than a Jack Ryan, than The Night Agent. And these are, again, Night Agent I love using as an example because the showrunner behind that is Sean Ryan, who literally cut his teeth in broadcast and basic cable. And he knows how to make a show on a budget. And that's not saying that The Night Agent doesn't have a higher budget, but The Pitt specifically first of all, it was designed to be an ER sequel, but the Michael Crichton estate did not bless it. So John Wells and R. Scott Gemmell, who were both ER veterans, pivoted and turned it into something wholly original with Noah Wyle again attached. So originally Wyle was supposed to reprise his role as Dr. John Carter, one of my favorite TV characters of all time. And
although
now
I think
instead,
the originality, Michael Crichton's estate is still arguing maybe it's not quite as original as they like to say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not involved with either show, and I have no idea about the lawsuit. I have not been following it. All I know is that...
Please do not serve us legal papers. We are not involved.
Thank you. Please do not serve me. But when I was reporting what became The Pitt, it was originally, when I was tipped off by a source, it was like, ER's coming back. It's an ER sequel.
Yeah.
And with John Wells, R. Scott Gemmell, and Noah Wyle. And nothing came of it. And then it died on the vine. And then all of a sudden... in my inbox one day, poof, here's The Pitt. So what John Wells did is he made a broadcast show for a streaming platform, and he did it on a budget. And he did it with 15 episodes, and he's going to bring that show back on an annual basis. When you think about streaming hits, the biggest hits in streaming, Stranger Things, right? Like, it's a platform-defining show for Netflix. And that show has never been on an annual basis. Wednesday, right? Another great streaming show for Netflix. Again, season 2, huge wait between. Obviously, there were strikes and, our world and our industry changed considerably in that time. But these are shows that don't come out every year. And The Pitt not only is going to be an annual thing, but they're going to do it with a high number of episodes that, again, emulates broadcast. So it's basically the streamer's effort to get shows on an annual basis, to do it on a more economical budget, and to keep subscribers, right? There's so the Pitt is, we're going to look back in 5 years and say The Pitt changed streaming TV and changed it for the better.
I like that. Do you think The Pitt would have been as well received if it were an ER sequel? Do you think we're more excited about it because it does feel just like, it doesn't feel like the Will and Grace reboot or like all the other like, or Frasier or whatever, all those other like blatant 90s nostalgia things. It does feel new in some way.
Yeah. I mean, I've only seen like the first 2 episodes of it, but honestly, Noah Wyle in a medical show, just yes. Like it's not a hard sell to anyone who grew up on ER or anyone who discovered ER once it became available to stream on Hulu back in the day.
Yeah. I mean, so I've been thinking about the best drama series as I've been catching up on The Pitt. At the Emmys, the White Lotus cast always usually goes supporting. So they'll be competing against the like massive amount of doctors in The Pitt. Noah Wyle, I think, obviously stands alone as lead actor. And then I was thinking about the actress category. There's not really a lead actress on The Pitt. And so then I started thinking about Matlock. And that is actual actual network TV. Like that is on CBS. It's starring Kathy Bates, who's been on a bunch of network TV shows, but it also feels a little bit elevated. It's kind of like the other side of the fence from The Pitt, where it's on a network, but it feels a little bit more like prestige TV. It's got Jenny Snyder-Urman running it. She's also made a bunch of, classic network shows like
Jane the Virgin.
Yeah, like network TV has like kind of been minding its own business. CBS continues to like get numbers. Like every now and then it kind of bumps into the prestige thing. Do you think they're just kind of going to watch as all the streamers try to turn into them and they've just been like doing their own thing this whole time and thriving just fine?
I mean, I think what's interesting is if you go back and look at how the streamers were launched, like go back to when Netflix first launched. It was a DVD by mail, right? Like I still have a red envelope in my garage somewhere.
You're in trouble for that. You
sorry
owe them money.
about that missing Battlestar Galactica DVD, Netflix. But Netflix basically built its subscriber base by renting DVDs of long-running broadcast shows, right? All of these streaming platforms were built on the back of huge broadcast hits. When Max launched, I still remember, the former exec Kevin Riley being on stage when asked if Friends would leave Netflix. And he goes, in success, we want to bring all of our own properties back into our ecosystem. Friends was produced by Warner Brothers Television. Warner Brothers streaming platform is HBO Max, or now just Max. Friends did move from Netflix to Max. The Office moved from Netflix to Peacock. It's produced by Universal Television, which is in the Peacock ecosystem. So if broadcast is, streamers built their businesses on the back of broadcast, and then eventually, because of Peak TV, they needed to have so much original content to keep and lure subscribers that they said, okay, well, let's recruit the biggest names, right? Netflix, paid for, millions to lure Shonda Rhimes away from her longtime home at Disney. Ryan Murphy left Disney for Netflix and then went back to Disney. But all of these streamers turned to broadcast producers to make originals to help define their platform, to help bring in new subs, right? Grey's Anatomy continues to be one of the biggest acquired hits on streaming platforms, and it streams on Netflix. And now they have new original shows to stream, from Shonda that can entice people to watch who watch Grey's on their platform. We have more from the same creator. But in terms of your question,
they got Bridgerton, they got The Residents. It's yeah.
But eventually all these streamers are now trying to become broadcast networks, and the broadcast networks have never stopped what they've been doing. And over the years, broadcast has become the punching bag of the TV industry, right? Like, oh, I don't watch anything on broadcast. I watch Matlock. I watch Ghosts. Somewhere along the line, I shifted from, into the CBS demo.
It happens to us all.
Broadcast was going to continue to do what it's going to do. It just, the price tag came down. Right? Like, because they didn't have Shonda making these shows. And now Ryan Murphy is going to make these, but he's going to do it on a different budget than his Hulu show or than his Netflix shows, or his FX produced shows that stream on Hulu, right? Like, everything is basically returning to the broadcast model because our era of contraction has begun and the peak TV period is over. So no one needs to make all these $200 million shows anymore, because how do you generate a profit or a return on those? And now you're an ad platform too on top of it. It's like there's a million things going on, but the one constant remains. Broadcast can deliver hits. The biggest way to reach a big, broad audience is broadcast television.
Yeah.
It's right there in the name.
Like, do you think, like, to go really big picture, like, we're going to look back in 20 years and see this period where, like, Game of Thrones was the thing that everybody was chasing, or, like, a big limited series like Mare of Easttown is the thing that everybody wants to do. Like, the idea of, like, the limited series or the big extensive shows was a real aberration, and TV kind of is always going to be what TV always was, and it felt like we were really transforming it for a while there, and now it feels like it's reverting to the norm. Does that feel right to you?
Absolutely. 100% spot on there, Katie. It's, when you look at the Pitt, I'm going to go back to this because it is such a fantastic example of everything that we're talking about here. They're making a broadcast show. It's elevated broadcast for a streaming platform, but it's essentially the same broadcast model. You're just doing it not for a network that comes free into, your that comes free to your TV, or, if you have bunny ears on your TVs, or I'm old enough to remember all that shit. But basically, everything that's working right now is elevated broadcast stuff. And when you look at these limited series, they were done because a lot of, like, I remember when Viola Davis signed on to star in How to Get Away with Murder, that was right after Kevin Bacon signed on to star in The Following. These are broadcast shows, and it was a huge deal that the episode count wasn't going to be 22 episodes, but it was going to be 15 because you have big name stars who are putting in a TV show in between their feature film work. And they wanted to do it because it was a shorter commitment. But when you're signing on for an ongoing series, the basic contract is you're signing a 6-year deal. And for a lot of actors, that was the appeal of a limited series, is I can do one season of television, 8 or 10 episodes, and fit it in between my film work and get paid as if it's a film, right? And that became a calling card, right? It's, if you're Netflix and you can get some of the biggest stars in the world to do a few episodes of something, everyone's going to tune in. It became something that helped you catch eyeballs, but it also became something with a huge price tag that just doesn't become a library. It doesn't exist as something that you can do anything with after it ends, unless it's, like you look at Big Little Lies. That was, to me, a great example. It was supposed to be one and done, always designed to cover the entirety of the source material, right? The season 1 was the book. And because it worked, it swept all the awards. It won the Emmys, it won Globes, everything. Not that Globes matter anymore, but I digress.
We go back and forth on whether the Globes matter. It's another podcast.
But when they renewed that show, of course they were going to try to find a way to bring it back. It was hugely successful for them. But Reese Witherspoon and Nicole Kidman were getting, I'm trying to remember my reporting, between $250,000 to $350,000 per episode for season 1. The show becomes a monster hit. Reese and Nicole do not have contracts for season 2. HBO is like, well, this is a monster hit. Let's bring it back. Now they have to go and pay them. And because all the other companies were elevating, guess what? HBO wound up ponying up more than $1 million per episode for Reese each and Nicole. So from 250K to $1 million an episode in one season.
But it was worth it to them, apparently.
Right. But eventually that kind of spending post-peak TV becomes untenable. And it's not something that you can't amortize it over time, et cetera. Like there's, it's a hit. Like if you look at Adolescence right now, right? I'm sure your listeners know all about that show. I've only watched the pilot. It is so good, but so, oh my God, so heavy.
Intense. Yeah.
But 4 episodes and out. So after you watch that, where do you go? What does Netflix do with that?
Yeah.
Right? And now they're talking about season 2. And that's what you do with it. But are those guys going to get going to get huge pay raises? Probably. Is season 2 going to be as good? Unclear. Will the ad rates for season 2 be high? You know it.
Yeah. I mean, the track record for expanding these stories is really checkered. I think Big Little Lies is a classic example. But I also wanted to ask you about The Handmaid's Tale, because you just interviewed the showrunner of that, Bruce Miller. It's coming back for its 6th and final season, which in the streaming era, I guess, it premiered in 2017. So it's really kind of a vestige of an older era at this point. And it's also based on a book. I don't remember if the first season covered just the source material. I think it expanded it from the very beginning. But is that a model for how you do it? Is that you have to go into it assuming that you'll go longer? And I don't know if what you learned from Bruce Miller talking to him about the final season that kind of, suggests where it stands in the ecosystem of what the streamers want.
I mean, I think The Handmaid's Tale, when it debuted, it was the show of the moment. And I think now that it ends its run, it's, again, the show of the moment, because it's mirroring our society. And it's, look, we're in scary times. And in terms of if that's the model for what streamers want, it's very rare for streaming shows to go more than 3 or 4 seasons.
Well, the Pitt hasn't yet gone 3 to 4 seasons, but we're all just rooting for 8. How long did ER go? Can we get an ER's worth of seasons?
Oh my God, 15? I mean, Grey's Anatomy passed it as TV's longest running medical drama of all time. But now it's number 2 overall. With Handmaid's Tale, that was a show that was going to go on for as long as they needed to tell that complete story. It became the first streaming drama to win an Emmy for Best Drama Series. When you have a show that becomes your calling card for a platform like Hulu and originals, you're going to treat it very carefully because it's a huge asset for you. That it got to 6 seasons is incredible in this climate. That anything can go for more than 3 or 4 seasons is a miracle in this landscape. But I also think that is something that is about to change because of things like The Pitt, right? Because you have to think of, as a show ages, the costs go up, right? The licensing fees, which is the fee, like if a show is produced by an outside studio, right? Like Handmaid's Tale is produced by MGM, which is not in the Disney ecosystem like Hulu. So that means that Disney has to pay MGM or Amazon a licensing fee for The Handmaid's Tale. And in success, the licensing fees usually go up. The cost of talent usually goes up. When you have a show that becomes a hit series like Ted Lasso, that became a calling card for Apple before Severance. After the first couple seasons, all of the cast and creators cashed in. They renegotiated their rates and scored huge paydays. Bill Lawrence got a massive new overall deal with Warner Brothers. And over time, at a certain point, the costs outweigh the gains. So if the added cost of a show increase, but the viewership, say people check out and they're like, oh, I didn't like season 2 of Ted Lasso, so I'm not going to come back or whatever, it becomes worth a little bit less over time, but the cost rises. So at a certain point, all these streamers figured out this money is better spent on new programming to bring in more eyeballs. And now that's changing because now these streamers are realizing, like the shows that they built their platforms off of, like Friends and The Office and even ER, you need a huge library of shows because you can bring people in with it and they stay on your platform, right? If there's 300 episodes of ER, like when ER first hit streaming, everyone, like my whole feed of, my whole social media feed was filled with TV reporters who were re-binging the show.
I know people doing it now.
Show. Oh, for
watching
sure.
it with The Pitt.
Absolutely. They go hand in hand. But these companies are now realizing that over time you can amortize the cost of a show over multiple episodes, over multiple seasons of a series, which brings the price tag down a little bit. Even if they renegotiate, if Noah Wyle comes in and says, double my pay because this is a monster hit for you guys and I want an Emmy, he's got all the leverage, right? And they're going to pay him because they want that show to run for as many seasons as it can. Because at a certain point, not only by keeping that in a calendar year, having that show come out every January as they plan to for season 2, you're going to keep viewers or subscribers engaged on your platform. And if that show runs 10, 15 seasons, say they wait a couple of years and they say, all right, now we're going to license this show to Netflix. That's a huge payday. They can continue to profit from this even after it ends, right? Like Friends continues to be a cash cow for Warner Brothers, and that show ended decades ago, right? Because they keep selling it, whether it's syndication to the cable networks, whether they license it exclusively to Netflix for a small window, whether they co-license it on Max and Netflix, or they sell it to another platform. It just keeps bringing in money. And if you can create a streaming show that has a vast library like that, the same is true for them too.
Yeah. I mean, I like the way we're talking about the Pitt and this sense of optimism about TV reverting to the mean, about having these longer running shows. I think it's really satisfying. I think a lot of people, TV critics including, are kind of realizing the pleasures of that. But there's also the side where we're losing like really weird television, like what we've got over the past 10 years. Like I'm thinking about like Showtime's The Curse, which was so strange. It's basically that Emma Stone had all this leverage and they were like, fine, we'll give you money to do whatever you want. Or the show that Damon Lindelof helped co-produce, Mrs. Davis, which I didn't think like totally worked and is never going to make Peacock a ton of money, but I was glad that it existed. And it does feel like we're going to lose that. And not that like all of these shows are things that people will remember forever, but with movies becoming so cautious, it felt like TV was a place that experimentation could happen. Do you feel like we're losing that entirely? Is there something to mourn there as we kind of go back to what TV was always going to be?
I do think that there's something to mourn. And for me, being a member of the LGBTQ community, with the demise of Peak TV comes the demise of shows that were made for specific audiences. A League of Their Own, right? Like I'm a huge baseball fan. That's my favorite movie of all time. And they made a queer take on A League of Their Own at Amazon. Holy crap, it was so good. It just filled in those tiny little gaps of where it's like you see a glance in the movie and you're like, that's queer. But now it's 10 episodes or however many episodes. The whole thing was actually queer. It's incredible. They renewed that for a second season. And they cut it down to 4 episodes. They announced it's going to be a final season. During the strikes, they say, you know what? We're actually just not going to make it. They had all the scripts that were written. Filming hadn't begun because of the SAG strike too. And then they just killed it. And you're starting to see a lot of those shows that were formerly considered niche programs, like League of Their Own, like Freevies, High School, which again was based on the adolescent years of singers Tegan and Sarah, right? Out twin musicians that were absolutely brilliant. And that show was fantastic, beloved by critics, gone after 1 season. Primo, again, another great Freebie show that was about a young Latino teenager. It's a coming of age story made for a very specific audience. Mike Schur exec produced it. It was fantastic. Again, one and done. And now Freebie doesn't even exist, right? They wiped that off the face of the earth alongside the CW and some of these other places that became entryways for young storytellers and sometimes niche storytellers.
I'll throw it off. Lie Means Death. I covered that show a lot. That queer audience was massive. It managed to get 2 seasons, kind of the entire time being like, I can't believe this exists. And now it's very hard to imagine it getting made.
Right, exactly. Like that show probably doesn't get made now because during PTV, you needed to find something to separate yourself, right? Everyone, like starting with Netflix, everyone wanted to be everything for everyone. You want to have something for the person in middle America. You want to have something for the coastal elites. You want to have something for all the different kinds of viewers, right? Seeing yourself on TV is an incredible feeling. I go back to when Ellen DeGeneres came out on her show. I was in college. That was the first time that I felt like I saw myself reflected on TV. And now, that stuff is not, it's not like it used to be, right? Like now it's everyone can say, oh, I saw this, right? Transparent was a huge thing for that, right? Like for the transgender community, like there's so many other shows that serve that function for a lot of people in this world. And a lot of those shows probably now wouldn't be made because everyone is chasing a big, broad audience, and you're going to get universal themes when you're doing broad type shows. Unless, a lot of these queer characters are now going to be relegated to, the gay best friend or something like that,
Maybe to end us on a positive note, though, like, again, going back to the Pitt, like, there is an effortless diversity on the Pitt in terms of the patients that they see and the staff who works there. You know, you've got Noah Wiley at the center of everything, but it's a pretty wide range of people who make up the staff of this hospital. And I do think that's something that TV wouldn't have done 20 years ago, and maybe we only could have gotten to after this period that we're now exiting. So I think, like, the lingering effects of having put storytelling in the hands of this many different people and made, like, the power of what happens when people see themselves on TV, I think that will stick with us, even if the stories are a lot broader than what we were seeing a couple of years ago.
I certainly hope so, my friend. I really hope so.
You got to stay optimistic to stay in this business, right? There's got to be some good stuff on the horizon, more than just season 2 of The Pitt.
Yeah, I mean, just to look at my list of the stuff that I'm excited about, it's ridiculous, right? Pulse, The Bondsman, Dying for Sex, Handmaid's Tale, Hacks, Black Mirror, Your Friends and Neighbors, Last of Us, Andor, Atoll, the 4 seasons, Poker Face, Forever. I watched the Forever pilot yesterday. Oh my God, it's so good. Duster, The Return of Rick and Morty. Like, there's so much good stuff in these next 2 months. My heart goes out to you because I know how busy you're going to be covering all of this stuff.
But I've seen the sum of what you just listed, not all.
It's so diverse in the themes, but it's some of this stuff. It's like a show like Hacks. Would you make a show with an elder woman at its center, pre-peak TV? Before peak TV? Like, remember when NBC canceled Harry's Law, which was the Kathy Bates legal drama? She was just like, Kathy Bates went off, and props to her, man. But she basically said, she's like, no one wants to watch an older woman on broadcast TV, and you're dumb because it was a high-rated show. And you look at Matlock now, it's fantastic.
Now here she is. She's really got the greatest, like, just desserts story of all time, which I think is why she's going to win an Emmy for it. Well, Lesley, there's so much TV to talk about. Once you've seen more of these shows, we'll come back and dig into other shows that you're loving right now. So thank you so much for being here, and we'll have you back soon.
Thank you, Katie. This was an absolute treat.
Now let's hear my conversation with Uzo Aduba, who is making a major return to television with The Residents. It's her first recurring series since her breakout in Orange is the New Black back in 2013. I was curious to ask her what it took to bring her not just back to a long-term TV commitment, but to take on the lead role in an original series. It's got an excellent supporting cast, but it's really all about her character, Cordelia Cupp. Her character is very much in the tradition of Sherlock Holmes, as you can see by the very snazzy houndstooth cape that she wears, as well as her quick-talking, quick-thinking banter with her castmates. But Cordelia Cupp is a different kind of detective in a different kind of location. She's been summoned to the White House to investigate an apparent murder that's happened in the middle of a state dinner, with the White House crammed with all the colorful personalities and potential suspects that you can imagine. I talked to Aduba about wrapping her head around her brilliant character and developing the really irresistible rapport she has with her co-stars like Randall Park, Ken Marino, and Jane Curtin. And we also talked about the impact it had on everyone on the show when Andre Braugher, who was initially playing one of the show's key supporting roles, passed away suddenly during production. His role was eventually taken over by Giancarlo Esposito, who is really excellent on the show. Uzo Aduba is a television icon for a reason, and I think you can absolutely hear it in our conversation. Listen to us talk about her role on Netflix's new show, The Residents. So this is not the first TV show that you've led. You had In Treatment a few years ago, but this is new. It's not a franchise. It's not something that anybody had seen before. So it's kind of resting on your shoulders, I would think, in a way, more than what you've done before. And I wonder
Thanks,
what...
Katie.
Well, very beautifully done, I would say. But I wonder if you thought about that when you were taking it on, knowing that this is something that, like, you're going to be leading in that specific way. If it's like a higher bar to clear, if you just say, okay, yes, I'm going to do this.
Oh, for sure. I hadn't done ongoing television since my first show, Orange is the New Black.
Yeah.
So that felt like a different sort of lift for sure, and still does, if I'm being honest, you know. But I welcome the challenge, to be honest with you. I love the material so much. I loved the character so much. I love the team so much. I welcome the tweed shouldered lift, you know?
Yeah, I mean, this is jumping ahead, but I'd heard you talk in other interviews about how long it took to find those tweed shoulders, like how you and the costume designer really worked on that. Like, did you have input on exactly how those tweed shoulders should look for Cordelia?
Not that specific jacket. You know, Lynn and I had been chatting and she had ideas, you know. She's this like really super cool British woman, you know, and legendary within the costume design world for film and television. And we'd gone through a series of coats and conversations also with our showrunner, Paul William Davies, who had, you know, a clear vision as well and wanted her to be very unique. I think that was the thing that we all were in agreement of. So we had tried blazers and trench coats and wool long coats. And then there was just this one day, came in for fitting, and it was just to try on one item. You know, it was one item.
Sometimes that's a full day of work. That's what's getting it done.
Just one thing, and it was the singular coat.
Yeah.
And Lynn was like, you know, darling, I just want to really give it a go, you know? I want to try it. Just put it on and see what happens, you know? If you don't like it, it's fine. It's all right. We can keep going. And you could just almost feel the energy of the jacket and how right it felt when we put it on. And it's so funny. And the only reason I bring up, you know, Lynn as being a Brit, because it has that sort of flair to it. You know, like you're going out hunting or something.
Duck hunting with the royals or something, yeah.
Yeah. And once it was on, I think everybody knew right away, this is the coat.
Yeah. Well, you're wearing it for so long. Like it's in almost all of the episodes. Like that really has to be your uniform. You got to feel perfect about that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it felt so right.
I mean, you mentioned that you knew, like, you were fans of the team on this, but Paul William Davies as the showrunner is someone you've got to build that relationship with, again, like being at the center of something like that. So what did you need from him in those early conversations to say, like, you're the guy I can build a partnership with you for this?
Well, I think first and foremost was ease of conversation. Feeling like you could talk to him was an important thing for me. And I felt like I could. I felt like I could really just talk to him comfortably. And I felt like I could hear the voice he was trying, the world he was trying to create when I first met him. Because the scripts are really funny, especially when you read the stage directions that nobody ever gets to see. You know, there's all these funny jokes that he writes in there for the reader.
And that helps you understand the tone, right? Like without the score, without the camera movement, that helps you get it, right?
100%. You could tell you see it, like just popped alive. And that helped me to understand also like the humor of the man, you know, and the show that he'd created. So that was the first thing. And there was just a real ease of speaking with him, which was important because if I was going to take on this character and bring her to life and really try and find choices that felt interesting to me, I wanted to be able to discuss those things with him comfortably. And we just had a real genuine ease. He's just such a great guy. I love him so much. And I think he's just so talented and witty and smart. We just really enjoyed the conversation and the dialogue for the world he had created.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's this like really kooky world, obviously these colorful characters, but Cordelia is so straightforward and dry in some ways. And the comedy is so subtle in part and performance. And I'm imagining it was somewhat on the page there, but how did that come across to you when you first read it? And how did you realize you were going to have to kind of bring out the humor in what she's doing with your performance?
Yeah, I remember thinking that she takes everything literally. She takes everything literally. That's how she listens and gets closer to the clues and the whodunit. What she's saying, she's not playing for the joke or the laugh. So that meant that everything, even if I know that it's funny, Uzo, the actor, I have to say it so seriously. Like no stopping for the thing. Like what's maybe going to be funny or I hope would work was maybe 2 beats later, somebody will get that something weird was just said, you know, she'll say something sort of like, well, and, you know, I didn't really love your hair anyway. And then the person will be like, wait, what did you just say? You know, it's like,
and then she's already in the next room to solve another crime. Yeah.
Yeah. So be like, have you noticed you chose to keep your hair in the Eisenhower? You know what I mean? Like whatever. And you're like, what? You know, like what just happened? So I thought that was like how to sort of just drive through it because she's already on to the next thing, even if she was maybe trying to be funny, she's already on to the next thing. And that was clear to me in the writing. You know, she had these really long phrases and complex sentences for every time she had a line. And so it's just, for me, the way she processes information just seemed really fast.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't time to stop because she doesn't stop.
Well, how does that information processing happen for you? Because you've got the script, you can read ahead to who did it, but you know, there's so many moving parts. There's so much time jumping. I mean, for continuity alone. But like, how much of that do you have to invest yourself in to be her brain, to think of it the way she does?
Sure. Well, I think the first piece is paying attention to how she listens. And the second is from like a technical standpoint, how to get those lines out, the information, like how to get those lines out. So the time really is spent, I think she is not interested in anybody's comfort or making people comfortable. Mm-hmm. I don't think she sees that as her job. I think she sees her only job as being solving the case.
Yep.
And she does not want to help a potential person of interest, as she calls it, not a suspect, to get any information from her. So she just turns off, like, you know, her emotions.
Yeah.
And she just truly listens to what a person is saying, not what they want to hear. You know, she's really listening to what you're saying. So that just involved getting really down to zero with the face and her listening skills. It's like, I don't want to be a source of, you know, where you're soundboarding. I want you to just tell the story as you remember it, the night as you remember it. So that was one. Two, the other piece, the technical part, was because she talks, it was really clear, like that processing. I was like, she talks way faster than I do. I'm kind of like a lollygag talker, you know, like I was like, I want to get in the story, really tell it, you know what I mean? And she's really, you know, snap, snap, snap on to the next thing. And I realized she processes information really quickly. And so that kind of, from a technical end, changed the pitch that I speak at, which is like just slightly higher than hers. I had to sort of drop her voice down a little bit. Yeah. Mostly because I realized that in order for me, Uzo, to talk that fast, I kind of had to not move my mouth as quickly.
Oh.
So I kind of had to talk a little bit down here and make sure I get her voice here, because this is how much I needed to move my face to be able to talk that quickly. Because I really did feel that's how she spoke. It just sounded like that's how she talked. She just talked really fast. That was to sort of get in there with the material. That was a thing that I was very conscious of. Like, I'm up here, but she's got to be a little bit down here. I can't really pull my mouth too wide, because if I really want to be able to honor what's written on the page and be able to get that out in a single breath, then I got to kind of live it down here and sort of sit back on my voice, a little off my voice, which is not how I normally speak, but those were the things I had to dig into.
I mean, it's all really technical, like, you know, the speed, getting your breath out, getting the voice out, and like the, you know, walking through the hallways of this incredible fake White House. There's so many logistical things. Like, is that part of the fun for you, of getting over all those and doing something truthful? Or is that something you kind of have to overcome to be able to get the performance into a real place?
Oh, yeah, it's super fun. You know, like there's the work that you do at home before you start, where when, you know, that first opening sequence when we meet her, she's on a ramble about these birds and Teddy Roosevelt, you know, when he came to be president. And that was a mouthful, and I was really keen to get that out the way I wanted to while walking through the house, unimpressed and by this birding list that I'm about to accomplish, you know, and couldn't accomplish but for this case, you know. So doing that work beforehand was useful for when we were on set and we're, you know, timing these long shots that we're taking, or sometimes we're doing one-er shots. And it's like, I'm glad that I've done this work in advance, so it's not as intimidating to come into it with no sense of how I'm going to play it. But I'm hoping that it plays well in the space in that way. And it was also, I was very glad that I had been doing my homework, because Francois, our production set designer, built such an amazing set. It's really
unbelievable.
It's next level. Like, it was so impressive. Our prop masters team, props masters, everybody, they just did such an incredible job with the design. It felt like you were in the White House.
When you went to the real one right before shooting started, right? So you could get kind of the walkthrough before the real set.
Yes. And it truly did feel like that. I was like, this is the White House. This is literally what it looked like. It literally looked exactly like this. And so I'm glad that I knew my lines, because I was intimidating to be in the White House, even if it's the fake White House. I was like, well, at least I know my part, like kind of a thing.
Well, there's something, to me, I think kind of moving about having the story set in the White House that's so separate from the turmoil that we see around it, like with an election every 4 years. And it's about kind of the longevity of it. And that's something that's represented by a lot of the characters, Giancarlo Esposito, particularly of like, you will come and go and we will stay here. And there's like a history to it. And it's about the people in this way that so often we don't talk about this stuff. And it's not really what the show is about, but it kind of is. And I wonder if that, that struck you as well making the show.
Oh, definitely. I thought it was this sort of like joyful honoring allegory of the people, and that it truly is the people's house. Like, that's the thing that we're getting to at the end of it, that it doesn't belong. It's not, no administration, no party is the master of this house, that in fact it actually belongs to we, the people.
Yeah.
And it's meant to represent all of that, the people of America, every single one of us, and the spirit of that. And I think that's like a joyful honoring, I even call it now the people's house when I think about it, because it's the reminder of every person who's enters that house, that's who they're there to serve at the end of the day. They're there to serve the people. And I think the show spotlights in a really beautiful way, this is like the allegory piece of it, like a lot of those people throughout our country who are doing the hard work every day and maybe don't get to be seen. And this show spotlights them and the work that they do. And we have a lot to say thank you to them for, because that's the backbone and the lifeblood of this country.
Yeah. I mean, did that also feel important for making this show before an election and knowing it was going to come out after, just being like, okay, this is a story that's in this world, but not of this world, and it can kind of live no matter what the real world political reality is?
Correct. I think that's the thing that's like really powerful about the show. And it's agnostic when it comes to politics, but it speaks more to us as a society than it does to any government or any politician, I think, which is pretty cool.
There's a way you can be apolitical and be kind of like meaningless and like make it sound like, nothing is actually important, but it's doing it in a different way. It's like about people in a way that kind of goes beyond it, which I didn't think anything could these days. It felt like everything could get dragged in politics, but like this show actually does.
Especially when you're doing a show centered that we've told stories either in DC and the House so many times. I've seen how many shows that I'm fans of, by the way, that have centered the West Wing, and now we're sort of centering the East Wing, and sort of bringing to light for some people that there have always been this like work apparatus present who we didn't even know live there, and kind of bring them to life in this sort of like funny, joyful, interesting way. I think is a great thing.
Yeah. I mean, so there's this great performance with Giancarlo Esposito in there as the murder victim at the middle of it, but had been originally played by Andre Braugher, who the last episode is dedicated to in this really lovely way. And I saw this great picture of you guys all at the table read. So obviously you got some time to work together, but obviously that's a really hard situation. But like from your perspective, like what was it like to go through that? And how do you feel about knowing that the finished product is out here as it is, but there was another version of it that only got half finished, I guess?
Sure. That was not an easy chapter, to say the least. Andre was such a titan in our business, such an incredible artist, and a lovely, lovely man. I cannot say it enough. Just like a lovely man. I'd never experienced anything like that, losing any castmate before while working with them.
Yeah.
Not an easy thing. And not an easy thing, by the way, for Giancarlo to step into. And what he did was step into it with such grace, class, reverence, and professionalism that you could only hope for, and did such an incredible job. He really did. He really did such an incredible job, and served that part with his own originality, but also was just such a lovely sort of steward of the memory of Andre as well.
Yeah. I mean, this cast is tremendous. Like, it's so big. Like, you have one-on-one scenes. I can't even, like, dozens of people and, like, really meaningful, meaty scenes with so many people. And, you know, Randall Park obviously is in a lot of them. Ken Marino's a big part of it. Susan Kelechi Watson. And, like, you know, how do you get your rapport in place? How do you get that kind of, like, rat-a-tat-tat speed where Cordelia's saying something and already moving on to the next thing? Like, does that take kind of an individual, you got to set it up with everybody to get those scenes done the way they need to?
Oh, well, we rehearsed them. You know, we had rehearsal before we even started filming, which was great with our director, Liza Johnson, who is amazing, who I absolutely love, which was like super helpful to understand like tone and pace and cadence for the show. I think also, you know, there's something to be said about not just the rehearsal, but time in the chairs with one another or hanging out too. It takes the shoulders from being up by your ears down to where they're naturally meant to sit, because you sort of start to develop a soft shorthand with each other as you're coming to know each other. Like those jokes and those stories and those songs and those funny quips you're, you know, batting back and forth between each other helps to sort of ease the space, ease the room. Also, I want to say that we had a cast always ready to work on it, which I love. You know, I come from a previous series of cast of actors who were always game to rehearse. The same was true here. And I was so happy to not only see that, but to experience it, you know, because it just helps to make everybody familiar with the material and hear the music in the lines. So we're all playing in concert with each other. You understand what the ingredients are in this thing that you're trying to make. The interpersonal experiences that we were having on a day-to-day just really did such great work to feed into the playing on screen.
Yeah. I mean, I'm imagining that kind of work really being necessary in scenes like, you know, the last episode, you're in there with like 25 people, I think, to play out that entire scene. But maybe there's other tricky ones I'm not thinking of. Like what, you know, over the course of the show, like what were the parts of it that really required that kind of work that might not be as evident to the viewer as they were to you guys?
Oh, wow. Okay. So, you know, there was scene with Randall and I when we're on the game room floor of the residence where everybody's sort of cleared out and we're going through up and down the hallways, and it's just the two of us, and you're seeing these longer shots, and we shot a lot of that as oneers. I think it got cut up in the end, but we shot a lot of that as oneer. So it really required both he and I, number one, to know our lines, and then just a sense of play and keeping, I think, that buoyancy up. I feel like that even though Cordelia and Edwin don't necessarily fuse in that moment, to me, when I was reading it, I remember feeling like I could hear how the two might duet. There might be a pas de deux somewhere, you know, later on. And you could see that there's the first dance. Maybe that's the first dance that's in Red and Carmen opera Rage, you know, and then there's the other ones later. But it took a little bit of work for us to really, there was work for us to do there. But what I remember find most satisfying was how well we locked in with each other. And I was like, oh, we danced together like a lot.
Is that what makes a good day on set? You go home and you're like, man, we laid those breadcrumbs. Like, we got that in there.
Yeah,
like,
yes.
Is that how you feel when you get home?
Was great. Like, yeah.
Because like when it's a challenge like this, when you're figuring out the camera and the choreography and the lines, like, you know, you could go home and feel good about many different kinds of work. But I imagine this one has that special satisfaction of like, whew. Who knew?
Oh, for sure. It's like Dirty Dancing with the lift. The day when you get, it's like, feels like, you know, it's like.
I would love to see that in the world of the residence.
That's the day. Like, it's like, it felt like we were getting the lift. By the end, we're like, we did it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, so as we wrap it up, to ask the inevitable season 2 question, even though, you know, everyone is sworn to secrecy on all of these things. But, you know, you talk about this really deliberately as an ongoing thing. So it seems like whatever you want to share with us, like the world of Cordelia Cup is very vast to you. Do you see all the world of possibilities that you can't tell us about?
Well, you're going to hear it here for... No, I'm just kidding.
That would be an incredible accidental scoop.
You know, the truth of the matter is, it's like, of course, I enjoyed playing that part. You know, like, I really, really did. It was so much fun. The world was so cool. She was so interesting to me. I would love to, you know, see where she goes, but I don't know is the answer.
Yeah.
I wish there was like this giant secret I was sitting on. There is none. Like, I have no secrets.
Yeah.
I am curious and will always be happy to know in the noodle of my brain, you know, that she's off somewhere solving a case, and maybe we'll all get to experience it. Who knows?
That does it for today's episode. This podcast is edited by Brett Fuchs and produced by Brett Fuchs and me. Our theme music is by Dave Gonzalez. Thanks again to my co-host, Lesley Goldberg. Subscribe to the Prestige Junkie newsletter at theanchor.com and subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We will see you next week.